Hey guys, tonight we drift through time and across golden sands to a place where money jingles softly, not in coins or paper, but in tiny ocean-kissed shells. You find yourself standing at the edge of the Sahel, just as the sun slips behind a line of scraggly acacia trees. The air is warm and smells faintly of sweat, cumin and camel, like someone tried to make stew out of a leather sandal. A breeze kicks up dust, swirls it in lazy spirals, and pushes you toward a cluster of tents where flickering lanterns cast honey-coloured halos into the encroaching dark. You hear voices, hundreds of them, layered over the rhythmic braying of donkeys and the indignant squawks of chickens being carried upside down. People are everywhere, barefoot children chasing goats with bells around their necks, turbaned traders squatting over open bundles of goods, and tall women with brass coils on their arms and eyes that study everything without a word. You slip into the crowd, and the market wraps around you like a well-worn blanket, dense with smells, heat, and possibility. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, post your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Katsina, sometime in the 1400s, although the concept of sometime is fuzzy when calendars are flexible, and everyone agrees time flows slower when the wind blows west. This dusty town pulses with trade, acting as a beating heart in the long snaking body of the trans-Saharan routes. A line of camels plods past, each swaying gently with heavy packs slung across their flanks. The creatures look tired. You feel a little tired too. One camel glances at you with contempt, probably because it knows you're not hauling anything. Beneath the shelter of goatskin awnings, traders carefully display their wares. Bundles of indigo-dyed cloth, carved beads that glint in the lantern light, and copper pots so smooth you could see the night sky in them, if the pots weren't currently full of pickled fish. And then, of course, the shells, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one white, crescent-shaped, and barely the size of your fingernail. Cowries. You crouch next to a boy arranging shells on a woven mat in groups of 20. He frowns, counts again, then sneezes so hard the entire pile scatters. You help him regroup the little currency flakes while he thanks you in Hausa, then French, then Arabic. He's covering all bases. People around you speak in a delightful mess of tongues. Wolof, Songhai, Fulfulde. Somehow, they all understand one another well enough to agree on prices, or at least argue enthusiastically about them. A woman in a green robe elbows past you, clutching a basket full of garlic and tiny dried lizards. She looks like she's been awake since last Tuesday, and has no patience for indecisive buyers. You wisely get out of her way. Somewhere behind you, a griot, a West African storyteller, starts plucking a stringed instrument called an ngoni, weaving tales about sultans who could summon sandstorms with a glance. His voice is melodic, low and rumbling like a waterfall in a cave. People toss him a few cowries, and he nods appreciatively, slipping the shells into a pouch sewn into his hat. You're not sure what he's singing about, but your shoulders begin to relax all the same. Historians still argue whether this specific marketplace in Katsina ever hosted as many foreign merchants as legends claim, but what's clear is that the region thrived on trade, fueled by salt, cloth, iron, and the ever-glittering shells that trickled up from the faraway sea. And here's something odd you overhear. Apparently there's a man who claims he can tell the future by dropping cowries onto a strip of camel hide and reading how they land. It sounds absurd, but the line forming outside his tent suggests otherwise. Maybe he's just a really good guesser. As night deepens, oil lamps are lit in quiet succession, each flame wobbling like a sleepy dancer. Moths hover near them, unsure whether to worship or flee. The market doesn't stop. It simply softens. People trade more quietly, gestures grow slower, and a certain intimacy settles over the scene like a blanket stitched from sighs. You wander to the edge of the stalls, drawn by the sound of drumming, light, deliberate, and close to the ground. It's a group of children playing rhythms on overturned calabashes, their palms a blur, their laughter filling the air like fireflies. One of them offers you a cowrie in exchange for a dance. You decline, but not without considering it. You spot a merchant nearby wearing more jewellery than fabric. Rings clink as he beckons you over, lifting a cloth to reveal an array of carved talismans and amulets. Some are made from bones, others from polished quartz. One particularly eerie piece looks like it's been fashioned from a snake's skull. The man winks and tells you it wards off bad spirits, tax collectors, and overly curious relatives. Honestly, even just one of those would be worth it. You lean against a crate of dates, careful not to squish them, and take in the scene one more time. The night is warm, thick, and humming with history. And you're just a sleepy observer, lost in a world where money clinks like sea whispers, and nobody is quite sure if the moon affects market prices. But they're not taking chances. You're up before the sun, which seems almost rude, but the market begins long before the sky decides what colour it wants to be. You stretch your legs, a little stiff from last night's wandering, and notice a slow-moving procession of donkeys plodding out of the town's southern gate. Their breath fogs in the early chill. Each animal carries 2 thick slabs of pale, chalky salt, strapped across its sides like holy relics on pilgrimage. You fall in step behind the line, your sandals crunching on dry, pebbled earth. The road ahead is more of an idea than a path, just a long, narrow memory in the sand. The caravan leader, a wiry man named Lawali with a stick shaped like a question mark, whistles a tune that makes the donkeys pick up their pace slightly. He turns to you with a grin and says, "If they walk slow, you bargain low." You don't know if that's a proverb or a threat, but you nod anyway. These blocks of salt, sometimes called a mole, are more than seasoning. In this part of the world, they're currency. People will trade whole bags of grain for one carefully cut rectangle. Salt preserves meat, flavours food, disinfects wounds, and in some superstitions, even chases away evil spirits. More than gold, it keeps the gears of trade turning. Historians still argue whether salt was truly more valuable than metal in the long run, but in day-to-day life here, it's the backbone of bargaining. You stop to rest at a scraggly acacia tree, its shadow barely long enough to sit under. Lawali pulls a gourd from his donkey's pack and hands you a swig of something that tastes like a cross between vinegar and camel tears. You politely pretend to enjoy it. He laughs, showing more missing teeth than present ones. Around you, traders exchange stories. One swears he saw a thief trying to melt down a salt block to hide it, only to cry in despair as it dissolved in his pot. Another says he once received a cursed brick that attracted scorpions for 3 nights straight. That last one's probably made up. Probably. The landscape flattens as you walk on. Beige dunes, dotted shrubs, the occasional bone-white skull sunning itself beside the trail. This part of the world feels like it's been exhaled by time. Every now and then, a hawk circles above, keeping tabs on who's got meat and who's just dust and ambition. The salt caravans go both ways. From the Sahara comes salt. From the forest regions to the south, cola nuts, gold, and sometimes enslaved people. Though that part of trade history is the one no one really jokes about here. You hear quiet conversations murmured behind palms about kings who trade people like their cargo. It's the only moment today that the laughter stops. Still, the rhythm of the donkeys resumes. You notice how they all wear little leather charms tied to their tails, amulets said to protect against snake bites or bad spirits. One donkey, you swear, is wearing a tiny pair of cowhide booties. Fringe history alert. There's evidence some Saharan traders believed dressing their animals made them less likely to be targeted by desert jinn. Is it true? Historians are still debating whether it was protective or just high fashion for livestock. You make camp under a faded red cloth stretched between sticks. Lawali lights a small fire, burning dung and dried roots, and begins roasting thin slivers of goat meat. The smell is surprisingly pleasant. He offers you a piece with a wink. It's tough, slightly spiced, and makes your jaw ache, in a good way. As stars begin to appear, a young boy approaches with a wooden box tied shut with string. He says it contains pure salt from the Whispering Cave, which sounds entirely made up. Lawali chuckles and gives him 2 cowries and half a date. The boy runs off victorious. You fall asleep with the soft grunt of donkeys in your ears and the warmth of the fire on your toes. The desert is oddly cozy when you're not actively dying of thirst. And then it happens. In the blue-grey haze of pre-dawn, a shout breaks the quiet. One of the salt slabs has gone missing. It's not the first time this has happened. Lawali curses in Hausa and begins inspecting every pack, every pouch, every pair of suspicious eyes. Theft among traders is rare, but not unheard of. suspicion falls on a new guy, a beardless teen who joined the group only 2 days ago. He swears on his mother's life and his donkey's tail that he didn't do it. Eventually the slab turns up, buried half in the sand behind a bush, probably hidden there for later retrieval. No one claims it. Lawali glares at everyone, then shrugs and says, "The wind tried to buy dinner." Everyone laughs. The tension breaks. You wonder if the desert stole it just for fun. As the sun rises once again, so does the smell of boiled millet. Someone brews a bitter tea that tastes like hope and wet bark. You sip it slowly while chewing on a piece of date. Somehow it all feels very dignified. You glance back at the salt slabs being reloaded, each one carefully tied with thick leather straps. The donkeys blink sleepily. You too feel a little sleepier now, like the dust has soaked into your bones. The caravan begins its slow return to town, loaded with both goods and stories. And as you walk alongside it, one lingering thought keeps brushing your mind. All this movement, all this trade, all this effort, for tiny grains pressed into bricks and little white shells that once danced in ocean tides far, far away. Back in town, the sun now fully overhead, and your sandals coated in a fresh layer of powdered earth, you wander into a quieter quarter of Katsina. Here, the air hums with a different rhythm, not the clang of pots or the bray of donkeys, but the wet slap of indigo-drenched cloth and the scratch of quills on parchment. You've entered the domain of dyers and scribes, and both are equally stained, one with pigment, the other with ink. To your left, a narrow alley funnels into a courtyard dappled with shade from broadleaf trees. The smell hits first, musky, earthy, with an oddly pleasant undertone of fermenting leaves and ash. This is where the magic of colour happens. Women squat beside wide clay vats, stirring thick, inky liquids with sticks longer than your arm. Their hands are stained deep blue, fingers permanently kissed by dye. One woman smiles and flicks a splash of indigo water at your tunic. "Good luck," she says, and cackles when you jump back. A superstition, apparently. Accidentally staining a visitor means good fortune for the dyer. Or maybe she's just messing with you. The process is mesmerising. Bundles of white cotton cloth are dipped, wrung out, then hung across bamboo poles like tired ghosts in the sun. As the air hits the wet fabric, it changes, slowly morphing from greenish murk to brilliant blue. It feels like watching the sky decide what colour it wants to be. Historians still debate whether the dyeing methods here came from ancient Egypt, Persia, or evolved independently from local flora. What's certain is that the West African indigo tradition is older than many written alphabets, and more vivid than any desert sunset. You pause by a basket of dried leaves, Indigofera tinctoria, the source of the dye. A young boy offers you one, daring you to chew it. You do. Mistake. It tastes like you lick the bottom of a used shoe. He laughs so hard he drops his goat-hide satchel. You hand it back with as much dignity as you can manage. Beyond the dyers, under a canopy made of stitched hide, sit the scribes. Their tools, bundles of parchment, bottles of ink, sharpened reeds, and an exhausting level of patience. They write slowly, deliberately, dipping their pens with a solemn grace. A merchant sits nearby, dictating a letter to someone in Kano. The scribe pauses only to blow gently on the ink so it doesn't smudge. It smells faintly of crushed acacia pods. You watch as another scribe drafts a trade receipt, a cowrie transaction scrawled in Arabic script, tallying quantities with care. One line catches your eye. 32 shells for 2 goats. 1 shell returned for excessive bleating. You wonder if that's a joke or an actual clause. Records like these are surprisingly common. The Hausa were meticulous in documenting deals, especially as trade deepened and more seashells flowed in from the south. A scribe tells you that sometimes, instead of writing a number, they'll press a cowrie shell directly into wet clay and let it dry. A tactile receipt for those who can't read. It's both genius and, frankly, adorable. The scribe beckons you over. "Write your name," he says. You hesitate. Your handwriting isn't exactly historic, but you take the reed, dip it in ink, and scratch your name onto a scrap of parchment. It looks okay. He smiles anyway and rolls it up, tying it with a frayed bit of twine. "Proof you are here," he says, "even if you don't remember tomorrow." A goat bleats angrily nearby, possibly in protest of being traded. A woman leads it away with a string tied around its horn. balancing a bundle of freshly dyed cloth on her head. She walks with the grace of someone who's been balancing things since the womb. You try it with a small parcel of folded fabric, place it on your head, and immediately drop it. She doesn't laugh, just shakes her head like a patient aunt. You return the fabric and glance around. The walls of the courtyard are scrawled with chalk formulas, trade arithmetic, and what looks suspiciously like a love poem written by someone very bad at poetry. Your eyes are like two cowries in a bowl of milk. Yikes. Maybe stick to spreadsheets, friend. Quirk of the day. One trader explains that sometimes in big deals, people wrap cowries in dyed cloth bundles based on colour-coded value systems. Red means tax exempt, blue for long-distance trade, and yellow if the deal involves livestock. It's not a universal system, but in this town it's how they keep everything running. Outsiders often get confused and overpay. You decide to never trade anything yellow. As the afternoon sun shifts, shadows lengthen and dye vats are covered for the evening. The scribes roll their scrolls, tie up their bundles, and tuck their pens behind ears or into satchels. One of them yawns so hard his turban slips slightly sideways. The day is winding down. You leave the courtyard slowly, your tunic now spotted with indigo, ink, and possibly goat spit. But it's worth it. You've seen how trade isn't just about stuff. It's about systems, about symbols and records, and the colour blue as valuable as any silver. And as you wander back toward the scent of spiced lentils cooking somewhere in the distance, you realise something else. Cowries weren't just currency. They were connectors, tiny sea relics that linked the savannah to the coast, the past to the present, and yes, even a sleepy listener like you to this far-off world. The market's pulsing again, like it never really stopped. You're back in the bustle, weaving past stacks of millet and towers of clay pots, and something catches your eye. A merchant with a broad-brimmed hat and a sly grin, holding up a leather pouch like it's filled with magic. And in a way, it is. He unties the pouch with a flourish, spilling out dozens, maybe hundreds of little white cowrie shells onto a woven mat. They clatter like whispers, soft and deliberate, forming patterns as he separates them into lines. The shells glint in the sunlight, their curved backs catching light just right, like they're winking at you. You kneel beside him. He nods and places a cowrie into your palm. It's smooth, warm from the sun, and impossibly small. You've seen them used for all kinds of purchases by now, clothing, food, charms, even a camel's toenail once, don't ask. But this is the first time you actually hold one and feel its weight, which is to say, not much at all. They're practically weightless, but still, they move entire economies. He begins counting them into bundles of 20, stacking them into little pyramids. Every fifth pyramid is tied together with a strip of dyed thread. Standard counting technique, he says. You ask how much a bundle buys. He shrugs. Depends. You buying honey or a house? That's not an exaggeration. In some places, especially before metal coins became common in the region, cowries were the primary means of exchange. Thousands could buy land. Hundreds might get you a new robe. A single shell might fetch a snack, or nothing at all if your timing's off. Historians still argue whether their value was truly stable, or if local rulers deliberately inflated or deflated cowrie worth to control trade. Either way, people used them by the sackful. And here's your quirky tidbit. In one House of Folktale, a poor man tried to make his own cowries out of snail shells and got caught. As punishment, the village elder made him swallow real ones, one by one, until he turned into a chicken. The moral of the story? Don't counterfeit or prepare to cluck. Back in the market, the merchant starts a transaction. A woman approaches holding a woven fan and 3 cola nuts wrapped in banana leaves. They haggle in whispers. He offers 3 pyramids of cowries. She scoffs. He adds half a pyramid more and a handful of sesame seeds. A deal. You watch the shells vanish back into her pouch, like grains of sand returning to the sea. You wonder how many of these little shells actually did come from the sea. The answer, nearly all of them. Most were harvested off the Maldives, far across the Indian Ocean. From there, they passed through endless hands, Arab traders, caravan masters, local merchants, before landing right here in this dusty square in Katsina. Imagine the journey. A shell starts life clinging to coral, gets scooped up in a net, sorted, cleaned, and dried in the sun. Then it's packed by the thousands into wooden chests, loaded onto ships bound for ports in East Africa, and finally bartered inland through endless miles of terrain by traders with strong backs and even stronger opinions. And somehow, after all that, it ends up in your hand, slightly nicked, probably once sneezed on by a camel, now buying you a handful of millet cakes. Speaking of which, your stomach growls. You head toward a food stall where a woman is flipping rounds of millet dough on a flat stone over coals. She's got a system: dab, flip, stack, sprinkle, so fast you're convinced she's part hummingbird. You offer a pyramid of cowries. She squints at it. You throw in one extra shell for good measure. She nods, slides a cake into a leaf wrapper and hands it over with a wink. It's warm, slightly sweet and crumbles just enough to be messy. You sit on an overturned basket watching kids play nearby. One of them tries to flick cowries into a pot like marbles. Another counts them obsessively, murmuring numbers in Hausa until someone shouts and they all scatter like startled pigeons. Cowries are more than money here. They're toys, game pieces, jewellery. A man passes by wearing a necklace made entirely of cowries, arranged in elaborate rows. He's clearly proud. You admire the craftsmanship. He catches your glance and says, "Protection from spirits and ugly suitors." You nod. Everyone has their priorities. There's something soothing about the repetition of counting, the tactile shuffle of shells between fingers, the quiet rhythm of trade that doesn't need apps or spreadsheets. Just bundles, hands, and a good eye for when someone's trying to shortchange you. You hear a debate near a shady awning. Two elders are arguing over whether cowries should be counted by pyramid, pouch, or finger length. One insists it's traditional to measure value by how long a row stretches from wrist to elbow. The other thinks that's ridiculous coastal nonsense. They bicker lovingly, shaking staffs at each other while sipping thick baobab juice. You smile, leaning back and letting your eyelids dip just a little. The noise of the market is like a lullaby now. Familiar, textured, rhythmic. Cowries shuffle, pots clink. Someone yawns loudly and gets mocked for it by a nearby goat. You're not imagining that part. And in this sea of trade and shells, you start to sense the strange gravity of it all. Something so small, so seemingly insignificant, carrying the weight of lives, lands and legacies, all in the palm of your hand. You drift away from the centre of the market, chewing the last crumb of your millet cake and brushing off your fingers, which are now a suspicious shade of beige. The air grows quieter as the crowd thins, and soon you hear it, singing. A voice, clear and low, rises above the distant clatter of trade. It's not performance loud. It's more like the singer forgot anyone could hear him. You follow the sound around a bend, past a sleeping dog and a basket of smoked catfish that may or may not be judging you, and find him, the Waitstone man. He sits cross-legged beside a balance scale made from string and a bent stick. His wares: iron tools, hoes, chisels, little knives sharp enough to shave a mango. Neatly arranged in rows like obedient soldiers. Beside him lie smooth stones of various sizes and a tightly rolled mat of bundled cowries, each knotted like a caterpillar in hibernation. He's singing something in Hausa. You can't make out the words, but the melody loops in a gentle circle, hypnotic and steady, like he's keeping rhythm with his own breath. As customers approach, he smiles without breaking tune, his hands moving with practiced grace. Here's how it works. You pick up a hoe. He eyes it, nods, and places it on one end of the balance. Then he starts selecting weight stones, flat river rocks worn smooth from use, placing them carefully on the other side. Once the scale evens out, he does something that feels like sleight of hand. He measures the total value using shells, sliding them from his mat like someone dealing cards. The trick, of course, isn't in the measuring, it's in the performance. You see, part of haggling here isn't just about price, it's about style. The Waitstone man sings through the numbers, casually complimenting your taste, the strength of your arms, even the loyalty of your donkeys, which for the record, you don't have. It's a show, and the better the show, the more generous the deal. Historians still argue whether singing traders like him were common across West Africa, or if this was a local Katsina quirk, but either way, it's deeply charming. He pauses to offer you a deal on a curved blade. You politely decline. He shrugs and launches into a verse that might be about goats, but might also be a subtle insult. You're not sure, but he smiles the whole time. As you sit nearby, watching other transactions unfold, you notice the theatre of it all. One man pretends to faint at the quoted price, sprawling dramatically on the ground. The merchant feigns concern, fans him with a reed mat, and then knocks off a few cowries for revival purposes. Another customer claims the blade is cursed. My cousin bought one and now he's allergic to rain. The Waitstone man laughs, throws in a free sharpening stone, and offers a weather charm made of beads and string. Quirk alert. Some vendors attach one cowrie, just one, to the blade of a tool, claiming it blesses the edge, or keeps snakes from nesting in your harvest pile. Do these shells actually work as mystical repellents? No one agrees, but they sure move inventory. The sun rises higher. A child runs by, dropping a sack of cowries that scatters across the packed dirt like spilled sugar. Everyone instinctively stops. Eyes follow the rolling shells. A few adults leap up, scrambling to help him gather them. The Waitstone man even pauses mid-verse to retrieve 2 wayward shells near your foot. The boy bows and thanks everyone. A woman nearby mutters something about how cowries run faster than thieves, which is apparently a saying here. You wander behind the stall where the merchant's assistant is sorting more Waitstones. They're organised not just by mass, but by shape, colour and, oddly, sound. He taps each against a clay bowl, listening to the tone. You ask why. He shrugs. Some customers only trust stones that sing soft. You nod, as if this makes total sense. Because here, it kind of does. The merchant, now mid-song again, gestures for you to return. He holds up a tiny knife, polished to a mirror shine, and says it's good for cutting rope, fruit and lies. You're tempted, honestly. He's a good salesman. You trade a few shells for it, and he wraps it in cloth that smells faintly of pepper and iron. A rooster struts by, judging everyone. A goat tries to eat a customer's sandals. Nobody notices. It's a normal Tuesday. You sit under a patch of shade offered by a bent wooden awning. The Waitstone man finishes another song, accepts his payment, and pulls a cowrie from behind a customer's ear. For luck, he says, handing it over with a wink. There's something soothing about this rhythm. Objects changing hands, shells clicking softly, songs drifting lazily in the heat. The day slows down, but never stops. You lie back, fingers playing with the cowrie in your pocket, wondering how something so small can hold this much power. Not just as currency, but as a vessel of culture, of sound, performance, trade, and trust. And as the Waitstone man hums into the next verse, you let your eyes close for a moment, the chorus of quiet commerce cradling your thoughts like a lullaby dressed in sandals and string. When the sun begins its slow slide westward and the colours of the market soften to amber and clay, you find yourself drifting again, this time toward the date vendors, who always seem to lurk near the edges of conversation like gossip in fruit form. Their stalls are less formal, more like gatherings around heaps of wrinkled sweetness, buzzing with flies and opinions. You're lured in by the scent, caramelized sugar with a hint of fermented syrup. The dates are soft, sticky, and glisten like little brown jewels. A man slices one open with a thumbnail, offers it to you with an arched eyebrow. You accept. It tastes like sunshine wearing velvet pajamas. Beside him, 2 traders squat low to the ground, deep in conversation. Their voices are hushed but intense, the kind of talk that says, we're definitely judging someone. You edge closer, pretending to inspect a pile of apricots that clearly haven't been apricots for at least 3 seasons. They're talking about a shell tax. Again. It seems every month the Sultan tweaks the rules. Last week cowries imported from the south were taxed at 4 per 100. This week it's 5. No warning, no scribbled announcement nailed to a baobab, just whispers in the wind and the angry click of abacuses. Some traders are furious. Others? Thrilled, because they hoarded shells last month and just doubled their value overnight. Historians still argue whether such policies were deliberate manipulations or just chaotic governance flavoured with personal feuds. You chomp another date and let it glue your molars together. A good excuse not to respond when someone asks your opinion. Further down the row, under a shade awning made from repurposed fish nets, 3 men lounge with legs stretched out, roasting peanuts and roasting each other. They're swapping tales, who miscounted shells, who got cheated, who accidentally traded a whole sack of cowries for a bag of dyed sand because they didn't check the sparkle. Everyone laughs, except the one guy who definitely was that trader. He's busy inspecting his sandals with great intensity. One of the older men slaps a jug and says, "Cowries make men smarter, eventually." He grins with teeth stained by cola nut and gestures at the jug. You take a sip. It's warm, sour, and tastes like old grapes met a rusty spoon. You manage not to choke, barely. A woman walks by, her arms stacked with jars of honey sealed with beeswax and cloth. She's arguing with someone behind her, probably about whether cowries should be weighed or counted. It's an ongoing debate. You've heard all sides today. Counting is precise, weighing is faster, and bartering is for people who like to lose sleep. Someone behind you drops a clay bowl, it shatters with a satisfying pop, and the entire section erupts into exaggerated gasps. No one's hurt, but a nearby donkey kicks in solidarity and almost topples an entire pyramid of pomegranates. Right then the smuggler shows up. You'd think you'd notice a man with a missing nose, but he moves like fog, smooth, unannounced and vaguely damp. He wears fine silk robes, too fine for this dusty quarter, and the kind of slippers that never touch puddles. When he smiles, his moustache twitches like it's thinking about quitting. He has that look, like he knows something expensive and illegal and just might trade it for a story. He opens a satchel lined with velvet and tilts it slightly toward you. Inside, coral beads, redder than sunset and almost humming with heat. He claims they came from the belly of a sea serpent near Zanzibar. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs and says, or maybe just a diver with lungs like camels. He asks for cowries. A lot of them. You ask about the nose. He says royal justice and then gestures vaguely toward the palace. No one presses further. That phrase covers all manner of sins, from tax evasion to offending a cousin of a minor wife of a mid-level official. You pass on the coral, mostly because your pouch is feeling light, and this man's vibe feels lighter fluid adjacent. He smiles anyway, bows slightly, and drifts off again, a whisper in silk form. A young girl tugs at your sleeve and offers you a single date for one cowrie. A terrible deal, but her expression is serious business. You trade. She skips away victorious, yelling, 2 cowries, to someone like she just flipped a profit. You sigh and lean against a wall that's warmer than expected. The mud brick radiates heat stored from the day, grounding you in a way that even cowries can't. Around you, trade swirls, flavoured with rumours, seasoned with secrets. And while you're half listening to a tale about a man who trained parrots to count shells, a lie, probably, but vivid, you start to realise something. Bargaining here isn't just about goods. It's an art of performance. A careful ballet of eye rolls, pauses, soft threats and exaggerated yawns. Every sigh is a bid, every eyebrow raise a counteroffer. And that's the unspoken rule. Cowries matter, sure, but attitude wins. You slip a shell between your fingers, feeling its grooves. It's smoother now, maybe from use, maybe from time. Either way, it reminds you of something important. No matter how dusty your day's been, no matter how confusing the taxes or mysterious the missing noses, there's always someone willing to swap stories for shells. And in this world, that's currency too. As dust tiptoes in and the market starts to hum a little lower, you think maybe it's time to head back to your corner of the compound and call it a night. But curiosity, of course, has other plans. You hear someone mutter, "There he is, the man with no nose." Again. You've already seen one noseless merchant today, but this isn't the same man. This one is taller, leaner, and moving with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how strange he looks and dares you to care. His face is smooth where a nose should be, just flat skin and 2 high cheekbones that catch the lantern light like polished ivory. You try not to stare. You fail. He's draped in layers of imported silk stitched with coral thread embroidery, and his fingers glitter with rings made of horn and bone, each topped with something sharp or shiny. He walks like a man with secrets stuffed into his sleeves. He stops under a tattered awning and spreads a woven mat. From within his robes, he produces a small box carved from dark wood, oiled to a gleam and fastened with copper hinges. You're not the only one watching. A small crowd gathers, silent, like moths around a flame that might also be a trap. With theatrical slowness, he opens the box. Inside are seashells. Not the usual cowries. These are bigger, spiraled, ridged with pearly layers that shift colour as they catch the flickering light. They look fragile and expensive, and out of place here. He claims they were harvested from the black reefs beyond the Laughing Strait. No one knows where that is, but it sounds expensive. He lifts one and explains that each shell holds messages from the sea. If you whisper a trade deal into it, he says, the ocean will hear, and respond with fortune or failure depending on your honesty. That's a bold claim. A child gasps, an elder snorts. Historians still argue whether such rituals had real cultural basis or were invented by clever merchants to sell novelty. But in this moment, the drama of it works. A customer hands over a pouch of cowries, neatly tied in 6-count knots, and takes a single spiral shell, cradling it like a sleeping mouse. You watch the noseless man continue his pitch. Some people shake their heads and wander off. Others stay, hypnotized. You're about to leave when he gestures toward you. You, he says, the one with the polite stare. Come closer. You blink, look around, then shuffle forward. He offers you a seat on a straw mat and asks if you have anything to trade. You check your pouch. Light, embarrassingly so. And shrug. He considers, then pulls out a cowrie of his own. This one, he says, once belonged to a queen. She swallowed it before battle so her soul couldn't be stolen by sorcery. When she died, it was still inside. They cut it out and gave it to her daughter. You nod slowly, wondering if it's a lie, a metaphor, or just a bedtime story wrapped in mystery. Regardless, it's a compelling sales pitch. You offer him the curved knife you got earlier from the Waitstone man. He accepts it with a satisfied hum, tucking it into his robes without a glance. The cowrie is warm in your hand. He leans in and whispers, "Don't use it to buy food. It offends the spirits." You're officially unsettled, but also strangely delighted. As the crowd disperses, murmuring about sea spirits and queen's blood, he begins packing up. You linger a moment longer, watching him fold the mat with surprising care. He tips you a wink, not a friendly one, but the kind that says, "You're not done yet." And then, just like that, he vanishes into the crowd. You glance at the shell again. It looks like any other, if you're honest. Maybe a little shinier, maybe not. You tuck it into your pouch beside the rest, knowing full well you'll probably forget which one it is by morning. Someone bumps your elbow, a portly merchant balancing a jug of palm wine on one shoulder. "You get swindled?" he asks with a grin. "Maybe," you reply. He laughs. Good. Better than getting cursed. You walk together toward a cluster of fires where night traders begin to set up. The after-hours market. Deals in this zone are quieter, often weirder. You pass a woman selling potions made from fermented baobab leaves and frog saliva. Another offers teeth, not her own, strung together in necklaces that supposedly protect against betrayal. You stop at a small table where a man counts shells by moonlight. He lines them up, 20 by 20, whispering numbers in fulfulde under his breath. His fingers move with uncanny speed, flicking shells into piles like a gambler dealing cards. Every so often he looks up, narrows his eyes, then starts again. You're not sure if he's counting or divining. Someone beside you whispers that this man once counted 1,000 cowries perfectly, blindfolded during a sandstorm, while chewing battle nut. It's probably an exaggeration. Still, you're not volunteering to challenge him. The night grows cooler. A breeze rustles the edges of your tunic. The smell of smouldering wood, roasted onions, and dusty leather hangs in the air. You hear a faint rhythm, someone tapping a hollow gourd like a drum, and in that soft beat you realise this strange bazaar of shells, myths and missing noses is more than trade. It's theatre, it's ritual, and somehow you're part of the cast. You walk on, clutching your new cowrie, unsure whether to feel lucky, cursed, or simply amused. Either way, the market is still awake, and you're just getting started. The moon is high now, peeking down like a curious neighbour through the thatched rooftops, casting the market in silver and shadow. Lanterns flicker lower, cooking fires burn soft and slow, and most traders have curled up beside their stalls, cloaked in woven blankets and exhaustion. But one patch of the market is still alive. The cowrie counter's tent, glowing with a single flickering oil lamp, its flame dancing like a jittery ghost. You approach quietly, barefoot now because your sandals have finally surrendered to dust and overuse. Inside, a man sits cross-legged on a reed mat, his knees high and his eyes half-lidded with focus. In front of him, cowries. Dozens. No, hundreds. Maybe more. They spill across the mat like spilled milk frozen in time. He's counting. Not casually. Not in the distracted way you might count socks or stars. This is devotional. His fingers move in an elegant mechanical rhythm. 3 shells forward, 1 set aside, muttered numbers in fulfulde, then a long breath. Again. Again. You swear you can hear the shells clicking into position like puzzle pieces slotting into the shape of truth. He doesn't notice you at first, or maybe he does but doesn't care. You sit at the edge of the tent and watch. After a few moments he speaks, still looking at the shells. "Every cowrie carries memory," he says. "If you touch one too long, it remembers you. If you count wrong, it remembers that too." You nod like you understand. You don't. Not really. He finally looks up, his face weathered, with cheekbones like sand-carved stone and eyes clouded slightly with age or wisdom, or both. "You want to learn?" he asks. "Of course you do." He gestures for you to sit closer, handing you a small bundle of cowries tied in twine. They're warm, likely from the lamp, or maybe just the presence of many hands and too much night. You mimic his motion. 3 forward, 1 aside, whisper the numbers. It's surprisingly soothing, meditative even. The shells click. Your breathing slows, and for a moment, you forget you're a visitor. He corrects you gently when you miscount. The 4th isn't the break, he says. It's the listener. That's where you pause or the math goes wild. You try again. This time it flows. 3, 1, breath. 3, 1, breath. Like waves, you realize this isn't just counting, it's listening. Historians still argue whether cowrie counting methods were standardized, he says, finally leaning back. In Timbuktu, they use bundles of 40. Here, it's 20. In the south, it changes with the moon. He chuckles. Some say that's why trade was so exciting. No one knew who was rich until the 3rd argument. You grin. It tracks. He begins tying bundles together with strips of dyed cloth. Green for food trades, red for livestock, blue for imported goods. You've seen this before, but never this close, never this deliberate. The colours are a silent language, a shorthand system no 2 markets seem to interpret exactly the same. That's part of the fun, he says, and part of the grift. You ask if anyone ever cheats. "Oh yes," he nods. "All the time," his eyes twinkle. "That's why I talk to the shells. They tell me." You chuckle, but he doesn't. He just starts a fresh count, cowries sliding under his fingers like water droplets. Quirk time. He pulls out a clay tablet marked with small carved notches and dots. "My ledger," he says. You peer closer. It's not writing exactly. More like a system of symbols representing transactions. A kind of proto-spreadsheet made from wet earth and patience. You ask how he keeps it all straight. He taps his temple. Memory is the first vault. Clay is the second. He tells you of a trader who once tried to pass off fake cowries, made from carved bone, polished smooth and painted white. They looked real, he says, but the sound was wrong. He tosses a shell onto a bowl, click, then a fake one, thunk. You feel the difference in your chest. You wonder how many other senses you've forgotten to trust. You lean back against a wooden post as he works. The lamp's flame is smaller now, flickering like it's running out of things to say. Around the tent, the market is silent. Even the animals are still, their shadows curled beneath them like stitched-on blankets. In the quiet, he speaks again. "You know why I count at night?" You shake your head. No distractions, no arguing wives, no traders waving chickens in your face. Just me, the shells, and the stories they carry. You ask if he's ever lost count halfway through a bundle. He laughs. "All the time. That's why I sing to them. When the rhythm breaks, I know I've gone wrong." He hums a few bars of a tune, slow, repetitive, a kind of lullaby for currency. You hum it back. He nods approvingly. He hands you a small satchel, 20 shells neatly packed. "Practice," he says. "Every night. You'll sleep better." And it's true. You already feel a kind of calm you didn't know you were chasing. The repetition, the quiet, the soft glow of oil light against velvet darkness. It's better than any lullaby. You thank him and rise, legs a bit numb. He waves you off with a whisper. Don't let them spill. If they fall in the dark, they vanish forever. You walk back through the moonlit market, clutching your little satchel of shells, heart strangely full. The counting rhythm stays in your mind. 3, 1, breath. 3, 1, breath. And as the last of the lanterns gutter out behind you, you realize something else. Maybe cowries aren't just for trading. Maybe they're a kind of prayer. You wake before dawn to the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. The sky's still a deep navy bruise and the market lies hushed. Blankets over stools, embers glowing low, a lone rooster whisper crowing into the dark. You decide to stretch your legs, feet barely brushing the ground as you drift toward the edge of town. There's a path that curves just past the outer compound wall, worn into the earth by centuries of sandals, hooves, and wandering thoughts. It leads you toward a long, low rise of sand. Locals call it the dune that eats donkeys. Sounds made up. But then again, so did the cowrie that belonged to a dead queen, and now it's your good luck charm. As you approach, the breeze stiffens. Sand grits your teeth, flicking off your skin like playful pinpricks. You can feel the shape of the dune growing clearer even in near darkness, taller than expected, rippled with the wind's mood swings, and dusted with wiry plants clinging to its flanks like stubborn fleas. You're not alone. A few figures linger nearby, traders, herders, and one woman with a clay jug balanced on her head, watching the horizon like it owes her money. You nod. She doesn't nod back. Respect. The dune looms larger as you near, its crest curled like the edge of an old scroll. You hear someone behind you whisper, "That's where they vanished." You turn, an old man, barefoot, eyes foggy but amused. He leans on a stick that looks older than some villages. 2 donkeys and a whole bale of textiles, swallowed in the night. No bones, no trail, just gone. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Or maybe they just ran off. But where's the poetry in that? Historians still argue whether the dune's reputation comes from real events, traders genuinely losing pack animals to sudden collapses or sinkholes, or whether it was all local folklore meant to keep nosy kids and overconfident merchants from venturing too far into the shifting sands. You climb the edge, sand sighing beneath your feet. At the summit you see it, an uneven dip like a giant's footprint, half filled with soft powder and bits of old wood. Possibly part of a saddle, possibly someone's attempt at a dramatic campfire tale. The wind catches your scarf, tugging it like a child. You wrap it tighter and sit watching as the first threads of morning begin to stitch themselves into the sky. Pale blue stretches into gold, and the silhouette of the town behind you sharpens. Low rooftops, crooked chimneys, and the thin spire of the mosque catching the light like a whisper of flame. You let your fingers run through the sand. It's cool, almost silky. You imagine cowries buried beneath it, waiting centuries to be found. Or never found. Some say that's where the richest stash is, buried by an ancient merchant trying to avoid a shell tax and then misplaced forever. A boy appears beside you, breathless from the climb. He says nothing, just plops down and starts digging a shallow hole with a broken spoon. You watch. He digs for 5 solid minutes, pulls up a smooth stone, squints at it, sighs, and throws it over his shoulder. He looks at you. Looking for my uncle's fortune. He buried it here in 1342. You nod solemnly. Did he leave a map? The boy grins. He forgot where he put it. You both sit quietly for a while, the kind of quiet that only sunrise can justify. Eventually he leaves. You stay. From up here, you can see the path that snakes away from town, a faded line that splits the desert in 2, threading its way toward other towns, other markets, other cowrie-laden stories. And that's the thing. Cowries didn't stay put. They moved. On donkey backs, in woven pouches, inside fish bladders stitched shut with hair. They moved because people moved. Traders, smugglers, priests, messengers. Sometimes with maps, sometimes with nothing but rumours. They carried more than goods. They carried news, songs, lies, hope. The wind kicks up again. You stand, brushing sand from your tunic. One final glance at the dune. It doesn't look hungry, not today. Still, you walk backward a few steps, just in case. On your way down, you notice something poking from the sand. A shell. A single, ivory cowrie, caught between 2 blades of brittle grass. You bend and pick it up. It's warm somehow, or maybe your fingers are just cold. You wipe it clean and tuck it into your pouch next to the others. The market is waking now. Roosters in full volume, pots clanging, water sloshing from buckets. You hear the first shout of a trader claiming his onions were kissed by royalty. Someone laughs. Someone else coughs like a dying goat. Business as usual. You wander back in with dust on your ankles and a shell in your hand, wondering what stories it's already heard and whether it's ready to learn a few more. You slip back into the heart of town just as the morning call to prayer rolls out over the rooftops like a long-stretched exhale. The sound drapes itself across the market, humming through the bones of buildings and nudging goats awake. Someone sweeps the dust in slow, sleepy circles. A cat yawns like it's been working the night shift, and then you see the ledgers. Well, not the ledgers, but the men who keep them. Bent over scrolls, eyes squinting, mouths silently counting. You've arrived at the town's counting house, one of the quieter marvels of Katsina, an unassuming clay structure not far from the main mosque, its walls faded to a soft honey brown, its doorway marked by nothing more than a string of dried pepper pods. This is where cowries become paperwork. Inside, the air is thick with dust, ink, and that strange smell of old paper and boiled millet, somehow scholarly and snack-like. Scribes sit cross-legged on mats, surrounded by stacks of reed-bound books, bowls of cowries, and ink made from crushed charcoal and acacia sap. They don't look up when you enter. They're too deep in it, measuring the flow of shells like river engineers watching floodgates. One man finally glances at you and gestures to a low bench. You sit. He dips a reed pen into a tiny bottle, makes a dot, a line, a swirl, then pauses to rub his temple. 58 shells for 2 sacks of groundnut. Buyer tried to claim 60. Thought we wouldn't notice. He chuckles, then leans in conspiratorially. He paid 62. You blink. So, you overcharged him? He grins. He was bragging too loud. Tax on arrogance. It's hard to argue. This is Timbuktu's influence. The scribal tradition is strong here. Centuries of literate clerks trained in Arabic script and Islamic legal formulas, turning trade into language. Historians still debate whether every town had such robust accounting, or whether this level of bureaucracy was limited to intellectual hubs like Timbuktu and Kano. Either way, this office hums like an abacus in human form. You lean over to peek at one of the scrolls. The handwriting is elegant, looping, and maddeningly small. Entire transactions compressed into a few poetic lines. 20 shells, red cord, pay to M for 1 ox, slightly rude. 10 shells, blue cord, refund for fermented cheese declared haunted. 1 shell, bribe to gatekeeper for ignoring the ox's rudeness. Okay, you might have misread that last part, but honestly it tracks. Quirk of the day, one of the scribes is blind, totally. His assistant whispers the numbers and he dictates the entries by memory. Then he tests for accuracy by running his fingers along the shells laid out in neat rows, feeling for weight, surface wear, and spacing. Apparently he's never miscounted. You ask how many cowries move through this room in a week. Someone answers without looking up. Enough to build a palace or bury a lie. Depends on who's counting. In the far corner, you spot a small clay jar sealed with wax. A boy hovers over it, chewing a reed like it owes him money. That's the shell tax jar, he says. Top layers this week's take, bottom layers from before the last flood. He pauses. We lost the key during the last celebration, so we just shake it when someone complains. He shakes it. The shells rattle, complaint dismissed. You step outside into the growing light and realise the clerks aren't just bookkeepers, they're memory holders. In a world where most things are spoken and forgotten, they remember who bought what, when, for how much, and whether they smiled or swore when they paid. It makes you think, how many cowries have passed through how many hands recorded only here, in careful swirls of ink that will outlive every single shell. You follow a narrow alley away from the office, trailing behind a teenage girl balancing a stack of bound ledgers on her head with alarming grace. She walks like the scrolls are made of feathers. You're not even mad, you're impressed. A griot waits at the edge of the street, tapping a kora gently with one finger, watching the ledger girl pass. She carries 1,000 debts on her head, he says, and none of them hers. You pause to admire the phrasing. He grins. I save that line for visitors. You find a quiet bench in the shade and pull out your pouch of cowries. You tip them into your palm and count, just for the feeling of it. 26. Not bad. Enough for lunch, maybe a charm or a new gourd if you find one that doesn't leak hope and lemon juice. One of the shells is cracked slightly. You roll it between your thumb and finger. It's chipped just enough to feel like something's happened to it. Maybe it fell. Maybe it was dropped in anger. Maybe, just maybe, it travelled from the edge of the sea to here, passing through 100 hands, remembered only in the invisible space between lines on a scribe's scroll. A bell rings. Not a church bell, not here. but a hollow gourd clanged against a wooden post. It signals the start of midday trade. The town shifts. The dust rises. The cowries flow again. You slip your little hoard back into its pouch and stand, brushing off your tunic. It's time to rejoin the tide. You're halfway to the grain stalls when a burst of laughter pulls your attention like a rope. You turn your head just in time to see two women walking past, their backs straight, eyes forward, each balancing an enormous woven basket on her head. One carries cola nuts, the other dried hibiscus blossoms packed so tight they puff at the edges like burgundy clouds. They're not holding the baskets, not touching them at all. Their arms swing loose at their sides, not even a wobble. It's like the baskets are hovering above them, levitating with grace born from generations of perfect posture and absolutely no tolerance for dropped produce. You fall into step behind them, pretending you're headed the same way, which, to be fair, you might be. One of them tosses a joke over her shoulder, the other replies with a snort and a shake of her head, somehow without disturbing the precarious mountain of hibiscus blossoms. This is not their first balancing act. They stop beside a low table draped in goatskin, where an elderly trader is fanning flies away from a dish of roasted locusts. He doesn't ask what they want. He just lifts the corner of a cloth and reveals a shallow basket filled with, you guessed it, cowries. Each woman steps forward, tilting her head just slightly. One reaches up, plucks a cloth pouch from inside the rim of her basket, and drops it onto the table with a soft clink. They don't say a word. The trader counts the shells, weighs the cola nuts and locusts, then nods. Deal made, no drama, no debate. Trade here isn't always talk. Sometimes it's choreography, and that's the thing. In many Hausa markets, especially where women dominate food stalls, silence can be more persuasive than shouting. Historians still argue whether women were underrepresented in formal merchant records or simply chose to operate in spheres that didn't care about scrolls and ledgers. What's certain is that without them, trade would collapse faster than a lopsided basket. You try carrying a small parcel on your head. It's wrapped in cloth and contains exactly 10 cowries, your emergency snack budget. You manage 3 steps before it wobbles off and hits the dirt. The trader doesn't laugh. He just gestures toward the women and says, "They learned before they could walk." You smile and pick up your scattered cowries, brushing them clean. One of the women gives you a polite nod, then continues on, hips swaying just enough to shift the sunlight on her skirt, but not enough to disturb her head load. You're witnessing effortless economic poetry. You keep walking. The path winds toward a well where more women gather, not just to draw water, but to trade, gossip, and sometimes settle small debts. You hear snippets of conversation. One woman tells another she lent her 5 cowries 2 days ago, and the response is not defensive. It's a joke about cowries hiding in baby slings. The tone is light, but the math is precise. One girl, maybe 10 years old, stands beside the well with a tiny basket of palm fruit. She haggles fiercely with a boy twice her size and wins. He hands over 3 shells with a dramatic sigh, as though he's just parted with a family heirloom. Quirk of the day. You hear someone mention a tradition in which cowries are not just traded but sung into. Some women, they say, whisper short songs into their shell pouches before going to market, chants for luck, protection, or to keep flies off their melon slices. It's 1 part ritual, 1 part superstition, and 1 part retail strategy. You wish you had a shell song, but all you can think of is that jingle about millet pancakes from last night. Nearby, a woman strings cowries onto braided fibre, creating a belt that clinks softly with each step. It's both fashion and finance. You can buy lunch, then undo part of your waistband to pay for it. Efficient and stylish. You consider asking where she got it, but then she glares at someone for sneezing too close to her hibiscus bundles, and you decide maybe later. You pass a stall where a mother teaches her daughter how to inspect cowries, size, curve, smoothness. She holds one up to the light, shakes her head and sets it aside. The daughter imitates her with fierce concentration. This isn't play, it's education. In this world, knowing the difference between a shell worth a meal and one that's just pretty is survival. And honestly, these women run this stretch of the market. They walk with authority, they barter with a glance, they can spot a cracked cowrie at 10 paces and have enough mental math to recalculate your bill before you blink. If the scribes hold the memory of trade, these women hold its heartbeat. You round a corner where a line of baskets is arranged by colour: red cola nuts, golden grains, bright green okra pods. Behind them, more women squat in the shade, fanning themselves and offering one another bites of fried cassava. Every so often, a transaction occurs. Quiet, graceful, done in seconds. You buy a skewer of roasted plantain for 4 shells, handed over without ceremony by a woman wearing earrings shaped like little calabashes. You try to compliment them. She waves you off and says, "Eat before the flies do." Noted. You sit near a wall and take in the scene. No yelling, no flamboyant gestures, just efficiency, precision, and the occasional burst of sharp laughter that makes you think someone just roasted their cousin with nothing but eyebrow movement. And as you munch your plantain, you realise that trade isn't always spectacle. Sometimes it's balance, of weight, of silence, of knowing how to tip a basket just right without losing a single shell. You should have known the clouds were up to something. They started gathering around noon, first just a few, drifting across the blue sky like they were looking for something to scold. Then more arrived, puffed and grey like overcooked dumplings. And now they're having a family reunion overhead. The wind shifts, a goat sneezes. Somewhere a market dog starts howling, bad omen. You're halfway across the market when the first drop hits, cold, sudden, and straight down the back of your neck. Then the sky opens. Rain in this part of the Sahel doesn't play around. It doesn't ask for permission or offer a gentle drizzle. It just arrives with the vengeance of a merchant who just realised he's been shorted 7 cowries and a bowl of beans. Everything erupts. Canvas stalls flap like startled birds. Traders rush to cover their wares with tarps, gourds, or whatever they can grab. Blankets, cloaks, a child's homework. People yell across stalls. Grab the hibiscus and get the goats. Not that goat! You dart under an awning that's trying its best but sagging dangerously under the weight of collected water. A young boy pokes it from below with a stick. Bad idea. It dumps a bucket of rainwater onto a pile of sesame. The vendor lets out a noise somewhere between a sob and a swear. You decide not to make eye contact, and then, just like that, it gets hilarious. One man slips in a puddle and lands in a crate of dates. A woman screams, not in fear, but because she was counting those. Somewhere else, a bundle of woven fans starts floating away like a fleet of boats. A donkey skitters sideways and crashes into a stall selling fermented fish. No one even tries to stop it. They just shout advice. Steer left, kick less. You've seen trade slow for many reasons. Haggling, fatigue, festivals. But rain doesn't slow it. It remixes it. A basket of cowries spills into the street. They scatter like little teeth, vanishing into puddles and mud. And 2 children dive after them, laughing like they've just been released from chores forever. One scoops up a handful and declares, "I found 10! I'm rich now!" The other counters with, "Those are snail shells, idiot!" The laughter continues. Historians still argue whether rainy season markets were strategically avoided or simply accepted as part of the cycle. Truth is, some traders like the chaos. It resets the rhythm, they say, clears out the lazy, keeps everyone on their toes or their butt depending on how slippery the ground is. A nearby spice merchant throws a thick cloth over his saffron jars and starts chanting what you assume is either a prayer or a very specific recipe. "Rain ruins ginger," he mutters, "but it blesses cloves." You nod because honestly that sounds poetic enough to be true. You spot a familiar figure hunched under a waterlogged reed hat. The coral smuggler from before, now offering discounted shell bracelets from beneath a leaking tarp. "Only half cursed now!" he yells, flashing a grin. You pass. The rain continues, a curtain of sound. You walk slowly through the new swamp of trade, feet squelching, eyes wide, watching the way everything adapts. Cowries are scooped back into bowls, scrolls are tucked into oilskin bags. One clever woman sets up shop inside her neighbour's overturned cart, calmly selling dried fish like nothing's changed. And then there's the singing. Somewhere beyond the row of collapsed stalls, someone starts a song, slow, deep, rhythmic. It rises above the storm like incense, twisting through the raindrops. You follow it, drawn in, soaked but curious. A group of griots huddles beneath a giant leather awning, instruments protected by waxed cloth, voices blending like tea and honey. Their song? About the rain, about traders slipping in mud, about a goat that became a prince and refused to pay taxes. It's absurd, clever, and very catchy. One of them spots you and nods toward a dry corner. You crouch there, wringing water from your sleeve. A griot hands you a calabash of something warm. You sip it. It's peppery, slightly sweet, and probably spiked. Doesn't matter, it's comfort in a bowl. Quirk of the day, someone leans over and tells you that in some older Hausa communities, when cowries got wet they were believed to wake up, meaning they'd misbehave during counting. Traders used to dry them over coals or even sing lullabies to calm them back down before tallying again. Can't trust a wet shell, the old man mutters, patting his pouch like it just misquoted a proverb. Eventually the storm eases. Not stops, just gets lazy. The thunder wanders off. The puddles remain. A cow moos somewhere, long and mournful, as if to say, we all suffered today. You emerge from your hideout soaked and steaming. The market is bruised but breathing. Traders begin resetting their stalls. Cowries are shaken dry in bits of cloth. One man actually blows on each shell like he's drying seeds for planting. And the buyers, they return, carefully, slowly, stepping around puddles with the precision of dancers who've been burned before. You buy a fried cassava ball from a woman with a face like a thundercloud. Extra cowrie for the dryness, she says, handing you a piece that's somehow still crispy. You pay it, happily. The world smells different now. Wet dust, spice smoke, sweet rot and resilience. The kind of smell that says, we're not done yet. You walk on, sloshing in your sandals, feeling the cowries shift in your pouch, suddenly heavier, as if carrying all the laughter, curses and soggy miracles of the morning. Trade hasn't stopped. It's just changed costumes. And you're still here for the show. You find shelter beside a low mud brick wall, still dripping, the sun peeking out sheepishly, as if it regrets letting the clouds throw that whole tantrum. The earth glistens. Cowries are drying out on flat trays, on rooftops, even on someone's sandal that's now acting as an impromptu dish. But you're about to glimpse the inner sanctum of market mystery. The ledgers. Not the polite kind you saw in the counting house. These are rougher, older, and entirely more chaotic. You're waved in by a wiry old man with a salt and pepper beard and a stack of reed-bound books that look like they've seen the reign of 5 sultans and 2 hurricanes. Come, he grunts. You want to see who owes who? This is where the lies live. He gestures to a scroll half unfurled on a bench made of tied rope and ambition. The ink is faded but legible, each line noting a transaction, or at least trying to. 3 bundles, millet, for 1 pot, cracked. 1 rope of cowries for 1 rooster, angry. Returned 2 shells after snake incident. It's part bookkeeping, part stand-up comedy. He flips another page. This is the tax ledger, he says. Everyone hates it. You can see why. It's organised like someone fell asleep halfway through and let the chickens finish the job. Entries cross each other. Some have been scratched out with what looks like charcoal, then rewritten sideways. 1 column simply reads, too many cowries, suspicious, check again. Another line adds, never mind. He's married to the Sultan's cousin, let it go. You ask how often these ledgers are audited. The man cackles so hard he wheezes. Audited? Son, this is the audit. Historians still argue whether shell taxes were consistently enforced or merely used as tools for favour, punishment or strategic forgetting. What's clear is that shell taxes were rarely straightforward. One village might pay 5 cowries per sack of grain. The next, 3 cowries and a song. Some towns even bartered labour. Build a well, skip a season of tax. Skip a tax. Maybe dig your own well-sized hole. You leaf through more entries. 6 shells paid under protest. 2 cowries withheld due to smell. 1 shell returned. Trader cried. The logic is fuzzy, but the emotions are crystal clear. The scribe taps a bowl full of broken cowries. Tax rejects, he says. We don't take chipped ones, or cursed ones, or ones that smell like fish. He picks one up and sniffs it theatrically. This one's still under investigation. You learn there's a whole ritual to collecting shell taxes. Once a week, usually after the midday prayer, the tax collector, a man named Garbo with the shoulders of a goat and the patience of a tortoise, makes rounds with a leather pouch. People come out reluctantly. Some smile, some scowl. Everyone pays. Sometimes they pay extra, just to avoid a longer conversation. The surcharge for silence, the scribe calls it. Most useful category in the book. Quirk of the day? There's a rumour that one especially clever merchant once stuffed his cowries with spices, tiny holes filled with powdered cinnamon or dried ginger, then sealed with resin. He paid his taxes like normal, then rebought his own shells later at the spice stall. It took months to uncover. By then, he was gone, or very rich, or both. You peer into the discrepancy pile, a small heap of cowries whose value is debated. Some are too big, others too pale. One has a hole drilled through it. Jewellery, the scribe says, can't use jewellery as currency, makes the shells proud. He hands you one to examine. It's heavy, smooth, but slightly off. You could trade it in another town, probably, but not here, not with Garber's system. Value here is local, emotional, and deeply suspicious of embellishment. The scribe opens another scroll and points to a list of names. These are debtors, he says, not all still alive. You notice some entries marked with a thumbprint. Others just have a symbol, perhaps a drawing of a house, a gourd, or a chicken. People used what they knew, he shrugs. You can lie with words, but your thumb's your thumb. Ha! You ask what happens if someone refuses to pay. He chuckles. Well, you lose access to the market. He gestures around dramatically. No yams, no ginger, no gossip. That last one might be the most painful. You glance over the final page. It's newer, fresher ink. The most recent entry, 3 cowries offered, too shiny, suspicious, watch him. No name, just that. You thank the scribe and step back outside, brain spinning from the tangle of economics and humanity you just witnessed. The market has dried into a rhythm again. Traders shout prices, a goat chews on someone's tunic. You spot Garber himself stalking through the stalls like a hawk in flip-flops. Your pouch feels heavier again, not in weight, but in context. Each shell now carries the ghosts of ledgers, arguments, and one poor sap who paid extra for silence. And as you rejoin the flow of trade, you smile at a passing vendor and think, I wonder what your tax line says. The sun is sliding down again, painting everything in that syrupy amber light that makes goats look heroic and potholes look poetic. You're walking slower now, the kind of pace that comes after a good meal or a long nap. You have neither, but the effect is the same. Everything's starting to feel soft at the edges. That's when you hear it. The low rhythmic beat of a drum. It's not ceremonial, it's not warning, it's just there. Steady, gentle. Coming from a corner near the edge of the square, where a small crowd has gathered around an old man in a blue robe and a pair of donkeys that appear to be tipsy. Yes, tipsy. One donkey is swaying in place. The other is hiccuping. An honest-to-goodness, full-bodied donkey hiccup that makes its ears flap. This is not a common sight. You shuffle closer and join the semicircle of onlookers, who are torn between fascination and trying not to snort millet beer through their noses. The old man sits beside a gourd drum, slapping it slowly while crooning a tune in a voice so rich and cracked it might be carved from leather. He's a griot, a keeper of songs and stories, and tonight he's working with unique accompaniment. Ladies and gentlemen, he sings, and tax collectors with no joy in their hearts. Laughter. Behold the donkeys who drank my fermented mash. Louder laughter. Apparently earlier in the day he'd been preparing a batch of fermented grain mash in a shallow clay bowl. He turned away for a moment, possibly to insult a rival's poetry, and returned to find 2 donkeys lapping it up like it was the fountain of youth. Ever since, they've been unusually cheerful and uncoordinated. Historians still argue, he says, pausing dramatically, whether these donkeys are cursed, drunk, or simply tired of being beasts of burden. A cheer. Someone throws him a cowrie. He catches it mid-air and tucks it into his robe without missing a beat. His story continues, how the donkeys danced, knocked over a spice stand, and were briefly appointed co-mayors of the Yam district before being disqualified for hoof-based corruption. It's all nonsense, clearly. But oh, it sings. You realise, watching the shells land at his feet one by one, that cowries aren't just currency here. They're applause. Each shell tossed into his lap is a vote, a laugh, a thank you. It's a culture where entertainment and economics blur until they're one in the same. And griots, they're not just musicians. They're walking archives, mood managers, and verbal sparring champions. Quirk of the day. A woman beside you mentions a tradition in which griots used to be paid in echo shells, cowries that had been dipped in dye and used only for performance payment. The idea was that you couldn't spend them on food or goods, just pass them along to another griot or return them to the original giver with a better story. The griot begins a second song, this time slower. It's about a warrior who lost his voice in battle, only to recover it while eating spicy stew and trying not to scream. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm makes sense to your bones. Even the donkeys are nodding. After the song, the griot shifts to a tale of a merchant who tried to cheat the market by sneaking in foreign cowries, larger, smoother, but slightly off-white. Too pale, he sings, like lies baked in the sun. It's a cautionary tale, but the laughter keeps it from being bitter. Someone asks for a love story. He nods, starts one about a woman who refused all suitors until one presented her with a cowrie so perfect it hummed when it was flipped. But when she listened, he croons, the shell said, "Marry the man with the donkey who hiccups." The donkey, right on cue, hiccups again. The crowd loses it. You toss in a shell and the griot gives you a slight bow. "This one," he says to the crowd, "has good taste. Probably terrible luck, but good taste." You stay until the sun dips fully below the rooftops. The donkeys have flopped over now, snoring softly. The griot wraps his drum in cloth and tucks it under one arm like a child. "If you see a man trying to sell you a singing shell," he says to no one in particular, "buy it, but don't listen to it before bed." The crowd disperses slowly. A woman nearby is still giggling. "Drunk donkeys," she mutters, shaking her head. "I've seen everything now." You walk back through the square, the night deepening, lanterns being lit one by one like someone's poking holes in the sky. You pass a merchant counting shells under a flickering lamp, his lips moving silently. You hear a faint hum from a nearby stall, the echo of the griot's rhythm still travelling through the space like incense. And in your pouch, a little less currency maybe, but far more value. You wake the next morning to an argument over a crocodile tooth. Not the usual rooster alarm or a sleepy merchant mumbling about millet. This time it's full-throated indignation echoing off the clay walls of the square. You stumble outside, rubbing your eyes and still tasting last night's spicy stew in your dreams, only to find a small crowd gathered around a narrow stall covered in patterned cloth and righteous fury. Two men are shouting, waving cowries and pointing at a third man who, to his credit, looks entirely unbothered. He's reclining against a sack of dried ginger, arms crossed, a crocodile tooth hanging from his neck like a smug pendant. You push through just as someone yells, "It's fake, I tell you, carved from goat bone," gasps. The crowd ripples. The accused shrugs and says, "Still sharp though." You've landed in the middle of one of the oldest market scams in the book, passing off fake cowries or trade tokens. In this case, it's not just about the shell itself. It's about the talisman, the kind of item someone might accept in place of actual currency during a barter, convinced of its mystical value. The man waving his arms insists he paid 15 cowries for a blessing tooth, which the seller swore would protect him from theft, drought, and argumentative in-laws. Instead, all he got was rained on, his pouch stolen, and his mother-in-law invited herself over for 2 weeks. The scribe nearby, probably summoned by all the noise, flips open a reed-bound record book and starts jotting notes. You peek over his shoulder. He's already titled the entry, "Toothgate." Historians still argue whether cowrie fraud was common in early housing markets, or whether these stories got exaggerated over time, told by merchants with more flair than integrity. What's certain is that systems evolved to combat it, like fines, public shaming, or, today's punishment, the crocodile fine. You ask what that means. Apparently, if you're caught knowingly passing false goods or counterfeit shells, and the community votes to spare you actual exile, you must pay a fine, with a crocodile tooth, real or not. And yes, the irony is intentional. The accused doesn't flinch. He unties a string pouch and dumps out, of course, another crocodile tooth. This one is darker, slightly cracked and more convincing. The crowd murmurs. He smirks. This one protects against complaints. You have to admit, he's good. Someone offers to test it. A woman holds it to her forehead, closes her eyes and declares, "My back pain is gone," then opens one eye and whispers, "It never hurt." The crowd cracks up. The scribe rolls his eyes and makes a note. Fine paid, healing unclear. You step back from the scene and find a quiet spot near a pepper stall. The smell burns your nostrils in a good way. A young trader nods at you and says, "Don't buy anything you can't chew." Good advice. You buy a string of dried chili pods for 5 cowries and ask the vendor if they ever get fake shells. He scoffs. "Once. Painted clay, cracked in my hand." He holds up his fingers and mimes it snapping. Made a noise like betrayal. Apparently the easiest way to spot a counterfeit is the sound. Real cowries click when dropped on wood or stone. Fakes do not. There's also a test involving vinegar and watching for bubbles, but that's more dramatic and better suited for public takedowns. You remember a saying someone muttered yesterday, A fake shell buys a fake friend. Quirk of the day, you hear from a passing elder that in some villages cowries were blessed with ash before trade, ritually smoked over herbs so that their energy couldn't be corrupted. Superstition. Maybe. But it added another layer to transactions. You weren't just trading value, you were trading vibe. You pause beside a stall selling glass beads and small mirrors. A man nearby is gluing something to the base of a sandal. You look closer. It's a cowrie, right on the heel. For luck, you ask? He snorts. To stomp out lies. You're beginning to suspect that in this town everything can be both currency and cursebreaker. A little boy runs by clutching a string of cowries looking guilty. A woman chases after him with a shoe. You hear her shout, "I paid you for spinach, not to disappear." The boy yells, "Spinach is emotional." Honestly, fair. You duck into a shaded alley where an older woman sells charms made of shells and feathers. She lets you hold one, cool to the touch, faintly scented with cloves. She says it repels liars and stomach pain. You trade 3 shells for it, mostly because it's pretty and partly because your gut has not been the same since that mystery stew. The tooth scandal fades as quickly as it arrived, replaced by a new debate over who's hoarding the freshest ginger. But something about it sticks with you. The idea that even in a world ruled by tiny white shells, trust is the real currency. Cowries can click or clunk, can be faked, chipped, or blessed. But trust, that's harder to mint. You tie your new charm to your pouch and give it a satisfied pat. And then you hiccup. Somewhere, the donkeys would be proud. It's late afternoon now, the sun brushing the rooftops with gold, and the air tastes like grilled onions and faint regret. You're ambling along the southern edge of the market where the stalls get spicier, not just in flavour but in personality. This is the Spice Quarter, where mouths burn, deals get loud, and nobody leaves without a story or a scorched tongue. You're greeted by a cloud of scent that smacks you right in the nostalgia glands. Cumin, cardamom, dried lemon, and something unidentifiable that makes your eyes water and your ancestors nervous. A woman calls to you, waving a fan made of folded paper bills from some other currency no one uses anymore. She has a tray of small clay bowls, each holding a mysterious powder or paste. "Taste," she declares, "or run." You try a safe-looking yellow one. Rookie mistake. Your mouth is immediately confused, then concerned, then furious. It's like licking the inside of a sunburnt chili pepper that's been scorned by its mother. You cough. She slaps your back with alarming strength. "Good. Yes," she grins. You nod. You lie. She hands you a dried mango slice. It doesn't help. You recover slowly, still hiccuping, and ask how much for a small pouch of the stuff. She sizes you up, sniffs the air theatrically, then holds up 3 fingers. You offer her a cord of cowries, 10 shells neatly strung, and recently blessed by your stomach pain charm. She sniffs them too, accepts. You notice she separates the shells after the trade. Some go into a pouch marked with red string, others into one with blue. "Hot cowries," she mutters, "and cool ones." Apparently she sorts based on who touched them. You ask why. "Some tongues lie," she says, "and their shells carry the heat." You're not sure if that's metaphor or literal spice paranoia. You move on. Next stall over, a man selling smoked peppers wrapped in leaves. He offers you one with a solemn warning. Mild. You fall for it again. Historians still argue whether the term mild held any consistent meaning in historical West African spice trade. The current evidence suggests absolutely not. Your face melts. Your eyes close involuntarily. Your body does that thing where it considers fainting just to escape the taste. The man cackles, hands you a cup of tamarind water, and says you're braver than you look. He charges you 2 cowries for the privilege of suffering and hands you a small badge made from bark. "I survived the fire pepper." You pin it to your tunic. You've earned it. Quirk of the day. You overhear a vendor claiming that particularly spicy transactions, where the goods themselves burned, used to require cooling shells. Cowries soaked in water before use. Supposedly, it appeased the spirit of the pepper and prevented digestive vengeance. You don't know if it's true, but it's oddly comforting. You soak your last 2 shells in your water cup for good measure. The spice sellers have flair. They sing their sales pitches. They challenge one another to heat duels. One stall boasts a pepper so strong it once made a camel sit down and refuse to move for 3 days. A child dares a friend to smell a blackened pod. The friend does, then runs. No one blames him. Despite the drama, there's a strange honour here. Prices are firm, trades are swift. No theatrics about value, just a mutual understanding that flavour is wealth and pain is part of the profit. You stop at a table of dried herbs wrapped in twine. The vendor explains how each bundle serves a purpose. Sleep, strength, courage, appetite. You point at one. What's this for? He deadpans. For negotiating after eating something you regret. You buy it. He tosses in a free clove and says, chew this if you want to sound wise. You tuck it into your pouch. No promises. Further down the row, a woman sells spice inks, paste made from saffron and ground seed husks, used for writing blessings or insults and secret messages. She lets you try one. You write a word on a scrap of parchment. It glows faintly, then fades. Only visible in steam, she says. Good for marriage proposals or revenge. You pay in shells. She taps one against her tooth to test it. Real, she says. Tastes like someone who's made bad decisions. Fair. The shells you trade here are mostly clean, plain. You notice none of the spice vendors except chipped ones. They split like promises, one explains. Useless. You make a note. Chipped shells are for sweetbread stalls, not spice stalls. You linger as the sky bruises into evening. Lanterns flicker on, shadows stretch. The air remains warm, but carries a sleepy spice. Softer now, like cinnamon and wood smoke cuddling. A man nearby slices ginger so thin it curls. He hums a song about a woman who traded one cowrie for a single clove and used it to win a cooking contest and a marriage proposal in the same afternoon. You want to win anything? He asks. You hand him your last soaked shell. Just a good night's sleep? He nods, places a sliver of ginger in your hand and says, chew. You'll dream in flavours. You do. You wake just before dawn, mouth still tingling faintly from that whisper-thin ginger slice. Dreams of pepper gardens and singing donkeys dissolve with the first rooster's crow. The market is quiet, temporarily asleep like a musician resting between notes. But today you're chasing whispers, not wares. You're headed to the palace quarter. Not into the palace, of course, you're not that bold, or delusional. But there's a place just outside the outer wall where the Sultan's private storehouses, wide, windowless, guarded by men who don't blink enough, cast long morning shadows. And behind those storehouses is where the real cowrie gossip lives. You arrive just as the gatekeeper's switch shifts. A yawning guard with a spear and a half-finished breakfast lets you pass without question. Probably because you're not holding a goat or a barrel or anything that screams suspicious tax dodger. In the courtyard beyond, you spot what you came for. Enormous clay pots, dozens of them, some taller than a man, each sealed with wax and cloth. These are the Sultan's private cowrie reserves. Historians still debate just how many cowries Hausa rulers stockpiled at any given time. Some accounts describe millions, literal oceans of shells, while others claim those stories were inflated by travellers trying to impress their royal patrons. Either way, this courtyard makes one thing very clear. Someone's hoarding. A servant walks past carrying a bucket. You gesture to the pots. All cowries. She nods. And those are just the decoys. You blink. Decoys? She smirks and keeps walking. Apparently it's common knowledge among traders that sultans didn't just hoard cowries, they weaponized them. If a rival city's market started booming, the sultan could flood his market with stored shells, crashing the value and causing all kinds of economic drama. Imagine tanking a currency not with numbers, but by simply lifting a lid and dumping a few million tiny white shells into circulation. It's brutal, it's elegant, it's deeply petty, and you kind of respect it. Quirk of the day. You hear someone say the Sultan once ordered his cowries counted by moonlight, claiming the reflection made them sing louder. When someone questioned him, they were reassigned to camel latrine duty. No one has challenged the moonlit method since. You linger near the pots, imagining the strategies. Shells from different sources, Maldives, Zanzibar, even inland rivers, sorted and stored not just by origin, but by political purpose. One batch for public projects, another for favour gifts, one for bride prices, one for emergencies, and always, always a secret stash no one admits exists. You pass by a smaller chamber where scribes are copying lists, names, amounts, destinations. You glance at a page. It reads like an elaborate shopping list and a passive-aggressive journal at the same time. 50 cords to Zaria for grain debt. Send with smile. 300 to Kano. Do not mention her cousin. 10,000 reserved, just in case he tries that again. You try not to ask. You fail. A young clerk explains, sometimes cowries are used to manipulate memory. If a ruler wants to make someone seem generous, they'll fund a public feast in their name, with cowries generously donated from the royal reserve. Other times, a small flood of shells in the right market can make a rival look greedy, or incompetent, or simply unlucky. It's not just economics, it's theatre, it's gossip made tangible, currency as narrative. You step outside, head spinning slightly, not from dizziness, but from the realization that cowries have never been just about trade. In the hands of sultans, they become rumours you can hold, and while you're marvelling at that, you nearly trip over a child sitting cross-legged beside the wall, arranging shells into shapes, a flower, a bird, a spiral. You crouch down. Practicing tax magic, she says. Tax what? If I get the spiral right, they forget to collect next week. You pause. Does it work? She shrugs. Worked for my uncle. Or maybe he bribed the collector with pickled okra. Hard to say. You smile, offer her one of your remaining shells. She examines it closely, nods, and adds it to her spiral. Nearby, a trader whispers to a friend that the Sultan just released 10 cords of cowries into the cotton market. Prices will drop by noon, he mutters, already planning to buy cheap and sell at dawn tomorrow. You watch him disappear into the crowd with the urgency of someone chasing a profit that hasn't even happened yet. It strikes you how these shells, lighter than breath, quieter than coins, have moved empires, broken deals, fixed marriages, sparked feasts and famines. Not bad for something that once clung to coral. And somewhere behind you, behind that thick clay wall, a new strategy is already unfolding. A merchant will gain favour. A rival will wonder why his market's dried up. And someone, somewhere, will swear their pouch felt heavier yesterday. You walk away slowly, the Sultan's hoarded wealth fading into the background, and your own pouch clinking with the modest certainty of an honest trader. Well, mostly honest. The sky is a soft smear of pale blue and dust as you make your way down the long winding road that snakes through the southern edge of the market. You're following a merchant with an unusually large gourd sloshing on his back and a gleam in his eye that says, "I've done something strange, and I'm not sorry." He walks with the urgency of someone who's either about to get very rich or very arrested. You catch up just as he settles on a low stool beside a row of empty baskets and sets down his gourd like it contains buried treasure. Which, in a way, it does. Because this gourd is full of seawater. Yes, actual seawater. In the middle of the Sahel. The merchant sees your expression and grins like he's invented fire. "Welcome," he says, "to the ocean that never came." You blink. He explains. Years ago, 10, maybe 15, a group of traders, dreamers, and likely a few madmen decided they were tired of relying on long, grueling trade routes to bring cowries inland. The solution? Bring the sea to the market. They gathered gourds, barrels, flasks, anything that would hold liquid, and began importing literal seawater from coastal settlements. Gallon by gallon, shell by shell, they tried to create a mini ecosystem for cowries to breed in. Historians still argue whether this was an actual economic initiative or the world's most elaborate performance art piece. But for nearly 2 years, they nurtured these homemade saltwater pits in back courtyards and clay cisterns, whispering prayers and occasionally yelling at the water like disappointed parents. The merchant pats his gourd lovingly. "This is all that remains," he says. "My personal ocean." You ask the obvious question, did it work? He grins wider. Almost. For 3 days, one shell twitched. Shell. Quirk of the day. One of the cistern owners swore he saw a baby cowrie emerge from a coral shard. He named it Lucky. Unfortunately, Lucky vanished after a cat fell in the tank. The cat, according to some, hasn't blinked since. You take a cautious peek inside the gourd. The water smells briny, slightly metallic and vaguely like old shoes left too close to a fish market. No movement, no shells, just water and a dream. The merchant sighs. The salt was never right. And the cowries, too picky. They miss the real tide. You can't trick a shell. You sit beside him on a crate someone's abandoned and share a small packet of puffed millet. He accepts a handful, tosses some into the gourd like a ritual. For Lucky, he says. He still trades cowries, of course. His pouch is heavy with them. Some real, some painted for luck, some likely just fancy buttons no one's had the heart to correct him on. But he insists that one day someone will crack the code. Inland cowrie farming will rise again. He gestures to a scrawled diagram on a goatskin, flowcharts, arrows, a sketch of a cowrie wearing a crown. Economic revolution, he says. You nod, chewing slowly. Despite the failure, people remember the attempt with strange fondness. At least they tried, a nearby woman tells you. It's more than I can say for my husband's onion patch. She holds up a shriveled bulb as evidence, and truthfully, the sea that never came has left its mark. Kids still tell bedtime stories of cowries growing like fruit. One even swears she saw one sprouting from a baobab root during the last rainy season. But it turned out to be a lizard tooth, she admits, unfazed. You wander through this experimental district, once brimming with water barrels and imported coral fragments, now more of a curiosity than a movement. The remnants remain, faded chalk drawings on mud walls of waves, ships and cowries with smiling faces. It's whimsical, strange, and a little sad, and yet, you get it. Cowries were life. And if something defines your world, why wouldn't you try to grow it yourself? You stop at a stall selling hand-painted gourds. One is decorated with a scene of tiny cowries dancing on waves. You buy it for 5 shells. The vendor throws in a smile and a blessing. May your pouch always click. As you leave, the seawater merchant shouts after you. If you find a spring that smells like fish and hope, bottle it. You wave, slipping the gourd into your bag and tucking the moment into your memory pouch, right beside the dancing donkeys and the woman who called you a cautious haggler, like it was an insult. Later, as you settle beneath the shade of a fig tree and sip from your canteen, you think about how the shells moved inland, from tide pools to temple walls to string pouches and ledger columns. They weren't supposed to be here, but they are. Not because the sea came, because people did. And even if they never managed to raise a living cowrie in a clay pot, you have to admire the ambition. Besides, you never saw Lucky. Maybe he's still out there, waiting. The wind shifts. It's subtle, more hush than howl. But you feel it in the back of your neck, that breath of something older moving through town. The stalls seem quieter today. Not silent exactly, just toned down, like the market's wrapped itself in softer cloth. You follow the hush toward the northern edge, where the trade paths thin and the crowd turns inward. You've heard of this part. Not everyone speaks of it loudly, but everyone knows. This is where the funeral traders work. Not sellers of funerals, no. These are people who prepare goods for the dead. It's a quiet commerce. Less shouting, more folding. Less haggling, more murmuring. And at the centre of it all, cowries. You stop beside a stall where a woman sits cross-legged, carefully stitching cowries into strips of dark indigo cloth. Her fingers are quick but gentle, threading them in tight spirals and circles like stars on deep twilight. For burial robes, she says before you even ask, shells help the soul remember where it came from. You sit nearby, watching. The shells gleam even in the shade, each one a small white eye that seems to blink with memory. They say cowries carry sea wind, she adds. When you wear them into the next world, the tide pulls you the right way. A man approaches, holding a pouch wrapped in red thread. He places it on the mat with both hands. She unties it and spreads the shells out slowly, counting them in near silence. Her lips move, but no sound comes. When she finishes, she nods once. He bows slightly and leaves. You ask what just happened. Final purchase, she says. His sister's spirit needs coins for the crossing. Historians still argue whether such rituals were widespread or localized to specific towns like this one. Some evidence suggests that in certain Hausa communities, cowries were buried with the dead or placed near graves as offerings to ancestral spirits. Others claim it was a later adaptation, mingling Islamic funerary customs with older regional beliefs. Either way, here, it's real. You walk deeper into the quarter, where the air smells faintly of ash and marula wood. A boy sells small bundles of cowries tied with dried herbs, protection tokens. He doesn't shout, just offers them with his eyes. You buy one. He slips it into your palm without a word. The weight is insignificant. The feeling is not. You pass a corner where a group of children sit in a circle, arranging cowries into patterns on the ground. One girl draws a line around them with a wet twig, then scatters sand over the top. Another brushes it away in gentle circles, revealing a flower pattern beneath. It's a game, yes, but also something more. You watch them pause before they step away, each touching one shell like it's saying goodbye. Quirk of the day. A local legend says that if a cowrie is placed under a pillow the night before a funeral, the dreamer will see the spirit's path in their sleep. Whether it leads to peace, or whether the spirit still lingers, looking for something unpaid, you shiver. A passing breeze tugs at your sleeve, dry and deliberate. You find your way to a gathering under a lean-to draped with woven mats. At the centre is a matron in violet robes, surrounded by shallow bowls filled with cowries. Some are cracked, some polished. All of them sorted into strange little constellations. She's murmuring something, an invocation, a chant. Or maybe she's just counting in the old way. When she stops, everyone leans in. She speaks in a slow, measured voice. The wind is turning. Today is for release, for shells to return. She gestures to a young man who steps forward and holds out a bundle wrapped in palm leaves. He kneels. A moment passes, then another. Then she unties the leaves and lets the shells fall into the wind. They scatter, not all at once, just a few at a time, like petals cast from an invisible hand. Some clatter on rooftops, others vanish into the underbrush. One rolls to your foot, pauses, then settles. You leave it. You're told it's bad luck to pick up a funeral shell. You help tie a strip of cloth around the base of a tree. It's tradition. For every funeral, a tree is marked, sometimes with shells, sometimes just a knot. A reminder that life paused here, that something worth remembering passed through. Someone near you whispers, "The shells speak louder in the wind." You don't respond. Not because you don't believe them, but because the wind is louder now, pushing through the alleyways, lifting dust, shaking out the day's heat like an old blanket. You watch it move the cowries still lying in the road. One spins, another skips once before going still. You glance up and see others doing the same, pausing to watch. No one rushes, no one speaks loudly. It's not grief exactly, more like reverence, a collective understanding that the trade of the day doesn't always involve baskets and shouting. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's sacred. You tuck your purchased charm into your belt and step away. And as you return to the market's louder sections, the ones with smoke and song and aggressive mango sales, you still feel the whisper of that shell wind at your back, like something remembered you. The horizon is already trembling with gold as you return to the heart of the market one last time. The light spills across the rooftops like poured honey, catching on edges of baskets, blades, and sleeping cats curled beside spice jars. Traders are stretching, yawning, whispering to their wares as if to wake them gently. You feel it too, that subtle pulse of almost morning, when the world shifts softly into motion but hasn't quite picked up its full weight. You don't have much left in your pouch, just a few shells, a half-eaten mango, and a folded piece of cloth embroidered with a single cowrie in the corner. A charm, a receipt, a reminder. You're not sure anymore. It doesn't matter. Because today, you're not here to buy. You're here to trade. It's not about quantity. It's not about profit. This final exchange is quiet, unhurried, no shouting, no haggling, just understanding. You step between the vendors setting up for the day, some stacking yams, others lighting tiny charcoal fires. One woman stirs a pot already boiling. She hums and the sound glides through the air like steam. It smells of cloves, roasted millet, and fresh possibilities. You pass the same stalls you've seen all week. The Waitstone man humming to himself, the bracelet vendor nodding at the sun, the child who still insists she'll find her uncle's buried fortune beneath the dune. Familiar now, like a loop that knows when to close, and then you see it. A man seated at the edge of the market where the street bends toward the river path. He's not selling anything, just sitting behind a cloth spread neatly with a handful of objects, a comb made of horn, a carved wooden spoon, a gourd painted with sea patterns, and one last cowrie. Slightly worn, chipped on one side but still gleaming. He looks up, nods once. You kneel, not out of reverence, just to meet him eye to eye. He says nothing, neither do you. You reach into your pouch and pull out the best shell you have left. It's small, unremarkable, but it's clean, and you've carried it through dust storms, ghost markets, funerals, and fire peppers. It's ready. You place it on the cloth. He smiles, Not wide, not showy, just a flicker of warmth like sunrise between clouds. He pushes the chipped shell toward you. You accept it without hesitation. It feels heavier than it should, or maybe that's just meaning piling up. And with that, the trade is done. No names, no records, just shells. You walk away slowly, not because you're tired, but because this deserves pace. Every step taps into memory. The blue-fingered dyers, the ledger scribe who hated goats, the donkey hiccups, the dune that may or may not be hungry. All of it. The whole bizarre, dusty, fragrant, clinking world of house-a-trade life, now braided into your senses. And you realise, cowries weren't just money. They were memory. Every shell carried a handprint, a voice, a breath of someone who once needed, offered, trusted. They moved like water, but held like stones. You find your favourite bench, a smooth one near the spiced lentil vendor who still insists her soup cured her cousin's fear of thunder, and sit. You take out the chipped shell, hold it up to the rising sun. It catches the light just enough to wink back, and for a moment you wonder, did it choose you? Maybe not, but then again, maybe it did. The market murmurs behind you, the city wakes, the sky warms, and somewhere, further down the road, past the date palms and the laughing goats, another trader lays out their mat, another shell changes hands, another story begins. Because the trade never ends, it just changes shape. The streets grow quiet again as the sun climbs higher. You're no longer walking, just sitting, letting the dust settle into your clothes, letting the morning soften your thoughts like worn leather. There's nothing left to do and nowhere else to be. The world can keep spinning on its cowrie-covered axis without you, at least for now. You run your thumb along the chipped edge of your final shell. It's cool again, no longer warmed by your pocket. The air has shifted. The breeze is gentler now, tugging at your sleeves like a lullaby. Somewhere, someone sweeps the same corner they always do. Someone haggles for the same bitter leaves they haggled for yesterday. But for you, the rhythm is slower. You close your eyes and breathe in the market's residue. Wood smoke, old ink, cracked clay, and that eternal whisper of salt. Impossibly far from the sea, yet always present. The shell in your hand could have come from anywhere. Could have been held by 10,000 people, or just 2. It doesn't matter. You've seen the way shells move, the way they speak, sing, trick, bless and bind. They've brought food, favours, forgiveness. They've carried joy and jokes and solemn silences, and now they carry you toward rest. So lie back, let your mind drift like a pouch of cowries on a caravan sway. No more counting, no more trade, just slow breaths, slow thoughts, slow dreams. The shells will still be here tomorrow. You don't have to be. 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 You don't have to be.